The rain hammered down on the city that night like it was trying to cleanse it of all its sins. But some sins ran too deep to be washed away. In a mansion glowing faintly with golden light, a woman stood before a large mirror, her eyes filled not with sorrow but with fury. Claire was her name, beautiful, polished, and utterly relentless. Her lips curled into a smile that was almost sweet, but beneath it simmered something venomous. She adjusted her diamond earrings and poured herself a glass of wine, her hand trembling only slightly. Tonight, she had made a choice. Tonight, her enemy would be erased. Claire had everything a mistress could want: wealth flowing to her through Daniel's indulgence, candlelit dinners, whispered promises in secret hotel rooms. But every time she touched him, every time he held her, she felt the shadow of another woman between them. That other woman was Emily, Daniel's wife. Emily, with her gentle eyes and growing belly, carried the child that Claire could never give him. That child was a tether, a reminder that no matter how far Daniel strayed, he was bound by blood to his wife. Claire's envy burned like wildfire. She couldn't stand the thought of Emily living in that mansion, carrying Daniel's heir, still holding a piece of him she would never have. And so she decided that Emily had to vanish. She reached for her phone, scrolling through numbers she should never have known. A friend of a friend had whispered about a man, a shadow who could make problems disappear for the right price. With trembling fingers, she dialed. The rain outside seemed to pause as the line clicked alive. A low, calm voice answered, one that carried no warmth, no hesitation. Claire swallowed hard, forcing her words past her lips. She spoke Emily's name, her address, her routines. She disguised her hatred in the language of business, as though she were hiring someone to remove an old piece of furniture instead of a living, breathing woman. By the time she hung up, her pulse raced with a dark kind of relief. It was done. While Claire toasted to her own cruelty, Emily sat quietly in her home, a hand resting over her swollen belly. The baby kicked gently, and a small smile touched her lips despite the loneliness in her heart. The house, once alive with warmth and laughter, now felt like a hollow museum. She could almost hear echoes of the past: Daniel surprising her with flowers, his laughter bouncing off the walls, his strong arms wrapping around her when she least expected it. But those echoes only deepened the silence she now lived in. Daniel had grown distant in recent months, and though Emily tried to pretend she didn't notice, the truth gnawed at her. His excuses grew weaker, his eyes more restless. Nights passed without him coming home, and when he did, his presence was like a stranger's, distant, cold, perfunctory. Emily wanted to believe his promises, but a woman's heart knows when love is slipping away, and hers knew the cruel truth: she was no longer enough for him. Her pregnancy, once a shared dream, now seemed to bind only her. Still, Emily clung to her unborn child as her anchor. Every kick, every flutter was a reminder that she wasn't alone. She would whisper lullabies at night, pressing her hand against her belly, promising her child a life of love, even if she had to give it alone. She didn't know that far away, someone was watching her, her name etched into a contract of blood. The man Claire had hired arrived quietly, his presence like a shadow that slipped unnoticed through the city. His name was Alex. To the world, he was a ghost, a man whose reputation carried enough fear to silence questions. He never missed his mark, never hesitated, never faltered. But beneath the mask of the hitman was a secret life, one that not even Claire's sources could uncover. Alex wasn't just a mercenary for hire. He was also an undercover protector, a man who had infiltrated criminal networks to dismantle them from the inside. His coldness was a performance, his silence a shield, and when he heard Emily's name, his blood froze. He hadn't heard it spoken in years. Not since he'd walked away from home, leaving behind the only family he had ever loved. Emily wasn't just a target. She was his sister. Memories he had long buried rose like ghosts in the rain. He remembered Emily as a little girl, her hand clutching his when their parents argued, her tears soaking his shirt when he promised to protect her forever. Life had torn them apart, forcing him into a dangerous world that Emily never knew existed. But even in the shadows, he had always watched from afar, keeping tabs on her, ensuring she was safe. And now, fate had delivered her name into his hands, not as a sister to protect, but as a target to destroy. Alex knew he couldn't refuse the job. If he did, suspicion would rise, and others would be sent. Men without his conscience, men who wouldn't hesitate. So he accepted, masking his fury behind a calm voice. But in his heart, he swore that no harm would come to Emily. He would play the part, step into the role Claire had written for him, but he would rewrite the ending. The following days blurred into a tense dance of shadows. Alex followed Emily from a distance, observing her routines, her vulnerability, her quiet strength. He watched her shop for baby clothes with careful eyes, pausing to hold up tea nurses with a bittersweet smile. He saw her sit alone in the park, one hand rubbing her belly, her gaze far away. He noticed the way she lingered at her front door at night, glancing over her shoulder as though she sensed the world closing in on her. Every sight tightened the knot in his chest. She was innocent, fragile, and yet stronger than she knew. Emily, meanwhile, felt the air around her growing heavy. She didn't know why, but she sensed something lurking just beyond her vision. The creak of floorboards at night made her heart race. Shadows seemed darker, sounds sharper. She found herself double, checking locks, pulling curtains tighter, whispering prayers before bed. But alongside the fear, there was also something strange, a presence she couldn't name. Though she was alone, she sometimes felt watched in a way that wasn't threatening, but protective. It was as though an unseen guardian had stepped quietly into her life. Claire, impatient with the lack of results, began pressing Alex for updates. She grew furious at every excuse, every delay. Why is she still breathing? Her thoughts screamed every time she imagined Emily's pregnant form. Her obsession grew dangerous, her jealousy consuming her sanity. To her, this wasn't just about love. It was about victory, about proving she could erase the one woman who stood in her way. But Alex played his part carefully, feeding Claire just enough to keep her satisfied while buying time. He knew the storm was building, that Claire's desperation would soon boil over, and when that moment came, he would need to be ready. Not just to stop her, but to reveal himself to Emily in a way that would change both of their lives forever. The stage was set: a mistress burning with jealousy, a wife clinging to hope, a brother hidden in the skin of a hitman. Fate had drawn its lines in the rain-soaked streets, and soon, those lines would collide. The nights grew colder, and so did Claire's patience. Days had passed since she had handed Emily's name to Alex, and yet Emily continued to live, her belly swelling with the life Claire wanted erased. Each moment was a reminder that her victory had not yet been claimed. Her jealousy burned like acid, corroding what little humanity she still possessed. Daniel was drifting back toward Emily, at least in appearances, torn by guilt and the weight of responsibility. Claire could feel him slipping from her grasp, and the thought of losing him drove her into a spiral of rage. If Emily continued to exist, Claire's dream of replacing her would always remain just that, a dream. One stormy evening, Claire poured herself another glass of wine, her hands shaking as she stared at the phone. She had trusted Alex to do the job, but his calm reassurances no longer soothed her. To her, he seemed slow, distracted, unwilling to finish the task. Her fury boiled over, and in her drunken haze, she decided she could no longer wait. If he wouldn't finish it, she would. Meanwhile, Emily walked the halls of her home in uneasy silence. She had grown accustomed to the strange feeling of being watched, but lately, it had shifted. It no longer felt threatening. Instead, it felt protective. She couldn't explain why, but she often caught herself whispering to her unborn child, telling them they were safe even though danger pressed at her walls. Perhaps it was the stubborn strength of a mother's hope, or perhaps it was the unseen presence of her brother, guarding her from the shadows. Alex had been near constantly. He watched Emily from a distance, hiding his face in crowds, blending into the background. Every time he saw her wince from a kick, or pause to catch her breath, his heart ached. She was so close to bringing life into the world, and yet so unaware of the death that stalked her. His own sister, his blood, marked for murder by a jealous woman who thought love could be won by destruction. That night, as the rain lashed against the windows, Emily settled into bed with difficulty. She had grown heavy, her body aching, her breaths shallow. She placed her hands over her belly, whispering to her child the same promise she made every night, that no matter what happened, they would never be unloved. She drifted into uneasy sleep, unaware that Claire was already on her way. Clad in black, Claire moved like a shadow through the night. Her heart raced, her mind fevered. She clutched the weapon in her hand, every step pulling her deeper into a darkness she could never escape. The mansion stood silent before her, Emily's sanctuary about to become a hunting ground. Claire slipped through the door with a cold grin, the storm masking her intrusion. Upstairs, Emily stirred. The sound of the floorboards groaning beneath foreign feet reached her through the silence. She sat upright, her heart pounding. Fear surged through her veins, and instinct told her that she and her child were no longer safe. She pressed her hands against her belly protectively, whispering a prayer into the air. Claire climbed the staircase, her eyes gleaming with madness. Every step echoed with her rage, with the twisted belief that Daniel would finally be hers once Emily was gone. She pushed open the bedroom door, her breath ragged, her hands trembling as she raised the weapon. But before she could take another step, the darkness behind her shifted. Alex emerged from the shadows, his figure towering, his eyes sharp as steel. In one swift movement, he disarmed Claire, sending the weapon clattering across the floor. His hand gripped her wrist with unyielding force, his voice a thunderclap that shattered the silence. For the first time in weeks, his mask slipped, and the truth poured out. No one touches her. Not while I'm here. Emily gasped, her eyes widening in shock. The man who had appeared so suddenly, the stranger who had saved her in the dead of night. She recognized him. The years had changed his face, hardened his expression, but his eyes were the same. Those eyes, once filled with warmth, now burned with fury, but she knew them. "Alex," she whispered, her voice trembling with disbelief. Tears welled in her eyes, cascading down her cheeks. Her brother, the one she thought lost to the world, stood before her not as a threat, but as her protector. Claire screamed in rage, thrashing against Alex's grip. "You were supposed to kill her. You were supposed to." Her words were cut short as Alex tightened his hold, his voice low, filled with a controlled fury. "I would never harm her. She is my blood. My sister, and you will never touch her again." Emily sobbed, the truth hitting her like a tidal wave. The fear, the strange sense of protection she had felt in recent days, it had been him all along. He had been watching, guarding, shielding her from the very danger Claire had unleashed. She reached out toward him, her hands trembling. "I thought I'd lost you forever," she whispered. For a moment, time stood still. The storm raged outside, the wind howling through the cracks, but within that room, everything narrowed to the bond between siblings. Alex looked at Emily, his hardened features softening as tears gathered in his eyes. "I promised I would protect you," he said quietly, "even if I had to do it from the shadows." The chaos that followed felt like a blur. Claire was dragged away, her screams echoing through the house as the authorities arrived. Her carefully woven lies and schemes unraveled, her obsession exposed for all to see. Daniel, confronted with the truth of her betrayal and his own weakness, broke under the weight of his choices. His shame left him hollow, his once grand illusions crumbling. Emily, though shaken and scarred by the ordeal, found herself standing taller than she ever thought possible. In the arms of her brother, she rediscovered not just safety, but strength. She realized that though her marriage had been poisoned by betrayal, life had given her something far more precious. Family. Not the family she thought she had, but the one she had forgotten she still had. When the time came, Emily held her newborn child in her arms, tears streaming down her face. The baby's cries filled the room, a sound of life that drowned out the echoes of darkness. Alex stood by her side, not as a shadow anymore, but as a brother who had returned to keep his promise. Together, they looked down at the tiny miracle, and Emily whispered through her tears, "You'll never be alone. Not with me. Not with your uncle." It was not just survival, it was redemption. A story of betrayal turned into one of love, of darkness turned into light. Emily's life had nearly been stolen, but instead, it had been renewed. And for the first time in months, as the dawn broke over the horizon, Emily felt hope bloom in her chest. She was not broken. She was not abandoned. She was a mother, a sister, a survivor, and she was no longer alone. If this story touched your heart, if it made you believe in the power of family, sacrifice, and second chances, please take a moment to like this video, share it with others who need to hear it, subscribe to Royal Stories, and comment below with your feelings. Special request, comment down below. What do you think was Emily's greatest strength, her love as a mother, or her ability to forgive and move forward?